Marcus Davidson pulled up to his favorite coffee shop in his brand new Ferrari, a gift from his father for his 20th birthday last week. The morning sun bounced off the silver paint job, catching the eye of everyone on the busy street. He didn't notice the attention. He was used to it by now. Being the heir to Davidson Enterprises meant living in a spotlight he never asked for. The bell chimed as he walked into Bean and Gone, the small coffee shop tucked away in a less flashy part of town. This was his escape from the mansion, the business meetings, and his family's constant pressure about taking over the company. Here he could just be Marcus, not the Davidson heir. "The usual?" called out Maya Johnson from behind the counter. At 40, she carried herself with a quiet grace that made her stand out. Her dark skin glowed under the shop lights, and her smile reached all the way to her eyes. Something Marcus had noticed wasn't common among the social circles he was forced to move in. "You know me too well, Maya," he smiled back, leaning against the counter. "How's Trevor doing with his science project?" Maya's face lit up at the mention of her 12-year-old son. "He won first place. You should have seen him, Marcus. That rocket design you helped him with really impressed the judges." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. He'd spent several evenings at Maya's small apartment, sitting at her kitchen table, helping Trevor work out the calculations for his project. Those evenings, with Maya cooking dinner while they worked, felt more like home than his family's massive estate ever had. "Trevor's a smart kid," Marcus said. "He gets that from his mom." Maya laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "Flattery will get you everywhere, but it's still going to be $4.50 for the coffee." As Marcus handed over his credit card, the shop's door opened. His stomach dropped as he recognized Jonathan Pierce, his father's head of security, walking in. The man's face was grim. "Mr. Davidson," Pierce said formally, "your father requires your presence at home. Immediately." Maya watched the exchange, concern crossing her features. Marcus tried to give her a reassuring smile, but it felt forced. He knew that look on Pierce's face. Something was wrong. "I'll see you tomorrow, Maya," he said. But Pierce cut in. "Actually, sir, your father has asked that you stop frequenting this establishment. It's beneath someone of your position." The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus saw the flash of hurt in Maya's eyes before she masked it with professional indifference. His hands clenched into fists. "My coffee choices are none of my father's business," Marcus snapped. Pierce remained unmoved. "Your father disagrees. The car is waiting outside." As Marcus was practically escorted out, he looked back at Maya. She stood behind the counter, her head held high despite the obvious insult. Something shifted in his chest, a rebellion against everything his family represented. What Marcus didn't know was that in the Davidson mansion, his father Richard was sitting in his study, looking at a folder of photographs. They showed Marcus at Maya's apartment, helping Trevor with his project, sharing meals with them. Richard's face was dark with anger. "Find everything you can about Maya Johnson," he ordered the private investigator standing before him. "Every detail, every skeleton in her closet. I want it all." "Yes, Mr. Davidson," the investigator replied. "And if we can't find anything?" Richard's smile was cold. "Then we create something. My son will not throw away his future on some coffee shop woman and her brat. The Davidson name means something in this city. I'll destroy her reputation before I let her destroy everything I've built." In her apartment that evening, Maya helped Trevor with his homework, pushing away thoughts of Marcus and the morning's incident. She'd learned long ago that some dreams weren't meant for people like her, but as she looked at her son, she couldn't help but think of Marcus's kind eyes and genuine smile. "Mum?" Trevor's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Is Marcus coming over to help with my new science project?" Maya's heart ached. "I don't think so, baby. He's very busy with his family right now." What Maya didn't know was that her life was about to become the center of a storm. The Davidsons had built their empire by crushing anyone who stood in their way, and they had just marked her as their next target. But they hadn't counted on one thing: the depth of Marcus's feelings for the woman who had shown him what real family could be. Marcus sat in his father's study, surrounded by the dark wood panels and expensive artwork that had always made him feel small. Richard Davidson stood by the window, his back turned to his son. "You're embarrassing this family," Richard said. "A coffee shop woman? And a single mother. What were you thinking? Maya is twice the person anyone in your social circle will ever be, Marcus shot back, and Trevor is a great kid. Richard turned, his face hard. You're 20 years old. You don't know what you want. I've arranged for you to take over the London office. You leave next week. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have a choice. Either you go to London or I'll make sure your little coffee shop friend loses everything. One phone call. That's all it takes. I wonder how fast the health department would shut down her shop if they received an anonymous tip. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. You wouldn't. Try me. That night, Marcus drove to Maya's apartment building. He sat in his car for an hour watching the light in her window. He could see shadows moving, Maya and Trevor probably having dinner together. His heart ached. He thought about going up there, telling her everything, fighting back against his father. But Richard Davidson's threats echoed in his mind. Meanwhile, in the apartment, Maya was clearing the dinner dishes while Trevor talked about his day at school. A knock at the door surprised them both. It was Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor. Maya, dear, there are some men asking questions about you in the building. They said they were from some kind of investigation agency. Maya's hands gripped the doorframe. What kind of questions? About your background, your ex-husband, Trevor's father. They seemed very interested in any problems you might have had. After Mrs. Thompson left, Maya sat on her couch, her mind racing. She knew this had to be connected to Marcus, to that man who'd come to the coffee shop. The Davidsons were investigating her. The next morning, Maya arrived at Bean and Gone to find a health inspector waiting. As she opened up, more people arrived. Building inspectors, fire marshals, tax auditors. Each one found problems that needed immediate attention. The repairs would cost thousands she didn't have. Mom, are we going to lose the shop? Trevor asked that evening. His young face worried. Maya pulled him close. No, baby. We've been through worse. Remember when your dad left? We made it through that. We'll make it through this. What Maya didn't know was that across town, Marcus was making plans of his own. He sat in his room, surrounded by papers. Bank statements, property deeds, stock certificates, everything his grandmother had left him when she died. Money that even his father couldn't touch. His phone buzzed with a text from Pierce. Flight to London booked for next Tuesday. Marcus deleted the message. He wasn't going to London, but he needed time to put his plan into action. He had to find a way to protect Maya and Trevor without them becoming targets. In his study, Richard Davidson reviewed the preliminary report on Maya Johnson. Not enough, he muttered. We need something bigger, something that will make Marcus see her for what she really is. The private investigator shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we've looked. She's clean. Single mother, works hard, pays her taxes. Her ex-husband was the one with problems, gambling debts, drinking. She left him to protect their son. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. Then we work with that. Find the ex-husband. Everyone has a price. See how much it takes for him to say she was the problem. I want stories in every tabloid about her dark past, her unstable behavior, her unfitness as a mother. Sir, that's illegal. If she proves it's slander, she won't be able to prove anything, not with her resources against ours. Do it. That night, Maya stood in her kitchen looking at the pile of inspection reports and violation notices. The fines alone would bankrupt her. She thought about Marcus, about his kind heart and gentle smile. She thought about how different their worlds were. Her phone rang, an unknown number. When? She answered. A man's rough voice spoke. Maya Johnson. This is Bill Tucker, reporter for the Daily Star. We're running a story about your history of mental instability and child endangerment. Care to comment? Maya's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, the phone slipping from her hand. In his room, Trevor was working on a new science project, humming happily. She could hear him through the wall, innocent and unaware that their world was about to be torn apart. Across the city, Marcus sat in his car outside the coffee shop, watching as another inspector left with a handful of citations. His jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd never used before. Grandmother's lawyer's office, a voice answered. This is Marcus Davidson. I need to access my trust fund, all of it, and I need it done quietly. The war for Maya's future had begun, and Marcus was about to learn just how far his father would go to maintain control of the Davidson legacy. The morning newspapers hit the stands with a splash. Maya's face was plastered across the front page of the Daily Star. Troubled past of coffee shop owner revealed. The article painted a horrible picture. Allegations of unstable behavior, claims from her ex-husband about endangering their son, suggestions of financial fraud. Maya's hands shook as she read the article. None of it was true, but the damage was already done. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing with reporters wanting comments. Regular customers walked past Bean and Gone without coming in, whispering and pointing. Trevor came running down the stairs, his backpack clutched tight. "Mom, the kids at school are saying weird things. They're saying you're crazy, that you hurt me." "Why are they saying that?" Maya pulled her son close, fighting back tears. "Sometimes people tell lies, baby. Bad people who want to hurt others. But you know the truth, you know who I am. Is this because of Marcus?" The question hit Maya like a punch to the gut. Before she could answer, her phone rang again. This time it was her landlord, telling her he was terminating her lease, both for the coffee shop and their apartment. He didn't want the bad publicity. Across town, Marcus stormed into his father's study, slamming the newspaper down on the desk. "How could you do this? These are lies." Richard barely looked up. "Consider it a warning. London is looking better now, isn't it?" "I'm not going to London. And I'm not letting you destroy Maya's life. You don't have a choice, son. The Davidson name means something. I won't let you throw it all away for some... For some what, Dad? Some woman who actually cares about people, who works hard and raises her son, right? Unlike you, who thinks money can solve everything." Richard stood up slowly. "You're young. You don't understand how the world works. That woman is using you. She sees dollar signs when she looks at you, nothing more. You're wrong about her. And you're wrong about me." Marcus walked out, ignoring his father's calls to come back. He drove straight to his grandmother's lawyer's office. Eleanor Davidson had never trusted her son Richard, which was why she'd left her fortune directly to Marcus, in a trust he could access at 21. He was a few months shy, but he hoped the lawyer would help. Meanwhile, Maya was trying to keep it together at the coffee shop. A brick came crashing through the window, sending customers screaming. Attached was a note. "Leave town. Trash. Officer." Sarah Chen, a regular customer, helped Maya clean up the glass. "You should press charges, Maya. This is harassment." "Against who? The Davidson family? They'd bury me in legal fees before I could even file the paperwork." Sarah frowned. "The Davidson family? What do they have to do with this?" Maya told her everything. About Marcus, about the threats, about the sudden inspections, and now the articles. Sarah's face grew darker with each detail. "That's not just harassment, Maya, that's criminal. And I know someone who might be interested in hearing about it." Later that day, Maya received a visitor at the shop, a sharp-dressed woman who introduced herself as Diana Martinez, from the State Attorney's Office, Financial Crimes Division. "Officer Chen called me," Diana explained. "We've been investigating Richard Davidson for months. Harassment, corruption, bribery of city officials, but nobody's been willing to testify. Until now." Maya shook her head. "I can't. They'll destroy me completely. They're already trying. The question is, are you going to let them win?" At the Davidson mansion, Marcus was packing his things when Pierce knocked on his door. "Your father wants to see you, immediately." In the study, Richard was watching a news report. The reporter was talking about an investigation into Davidson Enterprises, allegations of corruption and harassment. Maya's coffee shop was mentioned. "Fix this," Richard growled at Marcus. "Tell your little girlfriend to back off, or what, Dad? You'll destroy her. You already tried. But Maya's stronger than you think, and so am I." Richard's face turned red. "I made you. Everything you have, I gave you." "No," Marcus said quietly. "Everything I have, Grandmother gave me. And now I'm going to use it the way she would have wanted." What Marcus didn't know was that at that very moment, Maya was sitting in the state attorney's office, telling them everything. Trevor sat beside her, holding her hand, proud of his mother's courage. And in a small office downtown, Marcus's grandmother's lawyer was working late, preparing documents that would change everything. The trust fund wouldn't be accessible for a few more months, But there were other ways to protect Maya. Eleanor Davidson had made sure of that. The state attorney's office buzzed with activity. Diana Martinez spread photos across her desk. Surveillance images of Richard Davidson meeting with city officials, copies of suspicious bank transfers, and pictures of Maya's vandalized coffee shop. Maya sat across from her, her hands wrapped. "Around a cup of cold coffee. We've got enough to move forward," Diana said, "but you need to understand what you're getting into. The Davidsons won't go down without a fight." "I'm not doing this for me," Maya replied, thinking of Trevor. "I'm doing it because people like Richard Davidson think they can destroy lives without consequences." Outside the office, Trevor sat in the waiting area, working on his science homework. A familiar voice made him look up. "Hey, buddy." It was Marcus, looking tired but smiling. "Mind if I sit with you?" Trevor's face lit up, then darkened. "Mum says your dad is trying to hurt us." Marcus's heart broke a little. "My dad? He's not a good person, Trevor. But I'm not like him. I never want to hurt you or your mom." Inside the office, Maya was signing papers when she heard Trevor's laugh through the door. She hadn't heard that sound in weeks. When she looked out and saw Marcus, her heart skipped. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stepping into the waiting area. "The same thing you are," Marcus answered, standing up. "Trying to make things right." Diana watched from her office door. "Mr. Davidson, your testimony about your father's business practices would be very helpful to our case. That's why I'm here. But first, Maya, we need to talk." They found a quiet corner in the building's cafeteria. Trevor stayed with Diana, excitedly telling her about his science project. "My grandmother's lawyer found something," Marcus said, pulling out a thick folder. "When she died, she didn't just leave me money. She left evidence, years of documentation, about my father's illegal dealings. She was building a case against him." Maya stared at the folder. "Why didn't she use it?" "She died before she could. Heart attack. Very sudden. Very convenient." The implication hung heavy in the air. Maya reached across the table, taking Marcus's hand. He held on tight. "There's more," he continued. "The trust fund she left me, I can access it in 3 months when I turn 21. It's enough to help you rebuild, to fight my father's legal attacks." "Marcus, I can't take your money." "It's not about the money, Maya. It's about doing what's right. My grandmother knew what my father was. She wanted someone to stop him." Before Maya could respond, Trevor came running up. "Mom, Marcus, they arrested Mr. Davidson." They rushed her to Diana's office. The TV was showing Richard Davidson being led out of his office in handcuffs. The headline read, "Davidson Enterprises CEO arrested on corruption charges." "That's just the beginning," Diana said. "We're freezing the company's assets. The evidence you both provided opened a floodgate. Other victims are coming forward." Maya felt dizzy. Marcus steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "It's not over," he warned. "My father has friends, powerful friends. They'll try to discredit you, both of you. They'll say I'm just a rebellious son, that you manipulated me." "Let them," Maya said firmly. "I'm not afraid anymore." That evening, Maya and Trevor invited Marcus to dinner at their apartment. The furniture was packed in boxes. They still had to move at the end of the month, but it felt more like home than ever. As they ate Trevor's favorite spaghetti, Marcus watched them. Maya laughing at Trevor's jokes, Trevor excitedly sharing his plans for a new science project. This was what family should feel like. His phone buzzed, a text from Pierce. "Your father wants to make a deal. He'll leave them alone if you come back. Take over the company. Be the son he raised you to be." Marcus looked at Maya and Trevor, then at the text. Without hesitation, he blocked Pierce's number. "Everything okay?" Maya asked, noticing his expression. "Perfect," he smiled. "Everything's perfect?" Later, after Trevor went to bed, Maya and Marcus sat on her small balcony looking at the city lights. "I was wrong," Maya said softly. "About what?" "About not being able to fight them. About being alone." She turned to face him. "I spent so long thinking I had to protect Trevor by myself. I forgot that sometimes strength means letting people help you." Marcus reached for her hand. "Maya, A loud knock at the door cut him off. When Maya opened it, she found Diana looking grave. "They found your ex-husband," she said. "He's dead, and the police think you're involved." Maya's ex-husband, James Wilson, was found in a cheap motel outside the city. Empty bottles scattered around the room, a note on the bedside table that pointed to Maya as the reason for his death. The police called it suicide, but Diana Martinez wasn't convinced. Why? "Timing is too perfect," she told Maya at the police station. "Your ex-husband shows up dead right when we're building a case against Richard Davidson." Maya sat in the interrogation room, her hands shaking. "I haven't spoken to James in 3 years, not since he disappeared with Trevor's college fund. Detective..." Rodriguez slapped a folder on the table. "We found $50,000 in his bank account, deposited last week. Care to explain?" "That's impossible. James never had that kind of money. Maybe you paid him to keep quiet about something." Marcus burst into the room, followed by an older man in an expensive suit. "This interview is over. I'm Gerald Matthews, Mrs. Johnson's attorney." "I didn't hire an attorney," Maya started, but Marcus cut in. "I did. He was my grandmother's lawyer." "Maya, don't say another word." Detective Rodriguez smiled coldly. "Isn't this interesting? The Davidson heir providing a lawyer for our main suspect?" Gerald Matthews stepped forward. "My client has an alibi for the night in question. She was at the state attorney's office providing evidence in a corruption case, a case that I believe, Detective, your brother-in-law is implicated in." Rodriguez's smile disappeared. He gathered his files and left the room quickly. "How did you know about his brother-in-law?" Maya asked Gerald. "Eleanor Davidson kept very detailed records, including which police officers were on Richard Davidson's payroll and through what family connections." Back at Maya's apartment, Trevor was with Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor. When Maya walked in, he ran to her crying. "They're saying you killed Dad. It's all over the news." Maya held her son tight. "It's not true, baby. You know that. You know me." Marcus and Gerald sat at the kitchen table, spreading out papers. "The money in James's account," Gerald said, "was transferred through a series of shell companies, all leading back to Davidson Enterprises." "My father killed him," Marcus said quietly. "To frame Maya. We can't prove it yet, but there's something else. Eleanor left a safety deposit box. We haven't opened it yet, but according to her notes, it contains evidence about another death, a heart attack that might not have been natural." Maya gasped. "Your grandmother?" Marcus's face went pale. "The night before she died, she called me. Said she needed to tell me something important about my father. I was too busy with some party. I told her it could wait." Trevor came into the kitchen, his eyes red from crying. "I remember Dad talking about Mr. Davidson once before he left. He was on the phone, really angry, saying Mr. Davidson promised him money." Maya and Marcus exchanged looks. "When was this, baby?" "Right before. He took my college money. He said Mr. Davidson hired him to do something but didn't pay." Gerald started taking notes. "This could be important. Trevor, would you be willing to tell this to Ms. Martinez?" Trevor looked at his mum, who nodded encouragingly. "Will it help prove Mom didn't hurt Dad?" "It will help prove a lot of things," Marcus said. That night, after Trevor was asleep, Maya found Marcus on the balcony again. "Why are you doing all this? Hiring lawyers? Fighting your father? You barely know me." Marcus turned to her. "I know enough. I know you're the first person who saw me as just Marcus, not the Davidson heir. I know Trevor is the brightest kid I've ever met, because you raised him to be curious and kind. I know my father destroys everything good he touches, and I won't let him destroy you." Maya stepped closer. "Marcus." A gunshot cracked through the night. The window behind them shattered. Marcus pulled Maya down as another shot rang out. "Mom!" Trevor screamed from inside. Maya tried to get up, but Marcus held her down. "Stay down! Gerald, call the police!" Through the broken window, they could see a figure running across the rooftop of the next building. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Next time I won't miss, drop the case, or your son loses both parents." Police cars surrounded Maya's apartment building, their red and blue lights painting the walls. Officer Sarah Chen took Maya's statement while Trevor clung to his mother, refusing to let go. The shooter was professional, Detective Rodriguez said, examining the bullet holes. Clean shots, military precision. This wasn't some random attack. Diana Martinez stormed in, waving her phone. 4 other witnesses in the Davidson case received similar threats tonight, all at the same time. Marcus paced the small living room, running his hands through his hair. You need protection, both of you. We can put them in a safe house, Sarah offered. No, Maya said firmly. I won't hide. I won't let Trevor grow up afraid. Gerald Matthews hung up his phone, his face grim. Richard Davidson made bail. His friends in high places moved fast. Marcus kicked a chair in frustration. He's behind this, the shooting, the threats, all of it. Prove it, Rodriguez challenged. We can, Gerald said. Eleanor's safety deposit box. We open it first thing in the morning. Maya looked around her. Apartment. The shattered window, the bullet holes in the walls. Trevor's science project knocked over in the chaos. We can't stay here tonight. You'll stay with me, Marcus said. I have a place my father doesn't know about. My grandmother's old beach house. She left it to me separately from the trust. 2 hours later, they pulled up to a modest but beautiful house on the coast. Sound of waves filled the night air. Inside, everything was exactly as Eleanor Davidson had left it. Trevor fell asleep on the couch almost immediately, exhausted from the night's events. Maya covered with a blanket, kissing his forehead. He's strong, Marcus said softly. Like his mother. Maya wiped away tears. I'm not strong, I'm terrified. Your father's, he's not going to stop, is he? No. But neither am I. Marcus's phone rang. Pierce's number. He answered on speaker. Your father wants to meet, Pierce said. Just you. No. Lawyers, no police. He says he can explain everything. Where? The family lake house, tomorrow morning. After Pierce hung up, Gerald shook his head. It's a trap. Of course it is, Marcus agreed, but it's also an opportunity. While he's meeting with me, you can access the safety deposit box without him interfering. You can't go alone, Maya protested. I have to. He'll have people watching. If anyone comes with me, he'll know something's up. Diana pulled out her phone. I can have undercover agents nearby. No, he'll spot them. My father doesn't trust anyone, which means he has the best security money can buy. They'll be watching for surveillance. Later that night, when everyone else was asleep, Maya found Marcus sitting on the beach. The moonlight reflected off the waves, creating shadows that danced across his face. My grandmother loved this place, he said as Maya sat beside him. She used to say the ocean reminds us that some things are bigger than money and power. That nature doesn't care about your last name or your bank account. She sounds like a wise woman. She tried to stop him, my father. She knew what he was becoming. The corruption, the violence, the need to control everything and everyone. That's why she left everything. To me instead of him. Maya took his hand. Marcus, if something happens tomorrow, nothing's going to happen. Listen to me. If something happens, Trevor needs to know that these past few months, seeing you be so kind to him, helping him with his projects, it meant everything. Marcus turned to face her. Maya, A figure emerged from the shadows of the beach house. They jumped up, but it was only Trevor crying. I had a nightmare, he sobbed. I dreamed the bad men came back and took Mom away. Maya pulled him close. No one's taking me anywhere, baby, I promise. Marcus watched them, his decision crystallizing. Tomorrow, one way or another, this would end. His father had to be stopped, no matter the cost. What none of them saw was the red dot of a sniper scope, moving slowly across the beach house windows, watching, waiting for orders from Richard Davidson that would tear their world apart. Morning fog rolled across the lake, shrouding the Davidson family lake house in gray shadows. Marcus pulled up the long driveway, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Through the mist, he could see his father's Mercedes, already parked out front. Meanwhile, across town, Gerald Matthews and Diana Martinez approached the bank. The safety deposit box that could change everything waited inside. Maya paced in Diana's office with Trevor, watching the clock. At the lake house, Richard Davidson stood at the window, watching his son approach. Pierce stood silently behind him. Is everything in place? Richard asked. Yes, sir. If he doesn't cooperate, our friend on the hill has a clear shot. Good. And the others? 2 teams. One at the bank, one watching the boy and his mother. Marcus walked in without knocking. The house smelled of expensive cigars and leather, just as he remembered from childhood summers spent here. "Son," Richard said warmly, as if the past weeks had never happened. "Drink?" "It's 8 in the morning, Dad. It's 5 o'clock somewhere." Richard poured himself a scotch. "You've caused quite a mess, Marcus, but we can fix it, together." "Like you fixed..." Richard's hand paused mid-pour. "Careful, son. Accusations like that can be dangerous." She knew, didn't she? About everything. The bribes, the threats, the people you hurt. That's why she changed her will. Your grandmother was old, confused. Her heart was weak. Was it weak, or did you make it weak? At the bank, Gerald and Diana waited as the manager unlocked Eleanor Davidson's safety deposit box. Inside, they found a USB drive, documents, and a letter addressed to Marcus. Maya's phone buzzed. A photo message showed Trevor playing on his phone in Diana's office, taken from somewhere outside the building. Another message followed. One word from Mr. Davidson, and it's over. Back at the lake house, Richard set down his glass. "I'm trying to protect you, son. This girl, this coffee shop woman, she's using you once she gets her hands on your trust fund, like you used Mom, married her for her family's connections, then drove her away when you were done. I made this family what it is. You destroyed this family, and now you're trying to destroy Maya's family too." Richard's face darkened. "I'm giving you one last chance, Marcus. End this ridiculous crusade. Come back to the company. Take your rightful place. Or what? You'll kill me like..." "Who killed grandmother?" Richard smiled coldly. "Of course not, but accidents happen, especially to single mothers in bad neighborhoods, and their children." Marcus lunged forward, but Pierce grabbed him from behind. Through the window, he saw the red dot of a sniper scope dancing on his chest. "You're going to sign these papers," Richard said, pulling out a folder. "Renouncing your claims to the company, the trust fund, everything. In exchange, your little makeshift family lives." At the bank, Gerald opened the USB drive. His eyes widened. "My God," he whispered. "Eleanor recorded everything." Diana grabbed her phone, dialing quickly. "Get a team to the lake house, now!" Maya stared at the threatening photo on her phone, then at Trevor. She made her decision. "Come on, baby, we're going to the lake house." But Ms. Martinez said to stay here. "Sometimes, Trevor, you have to break the rules to do what's right." Marcus stared at the papers his father held out. The red dot steadied over his heart. "Time to choose, son," Richard said. "The Davidson legacy or their lives." Marcus reached for the pen, his hand shaking. Suddenly his phone buzzed. A message from Gerald. "Don't sign anything, we have it all. Eleanor's recordings, the proof." Richard grabbed the phone, reading the message, his face contorted with rage. He nodded to Pierce, who pressed a gun to Marcus's head. "Too late," Richard snarled. "You should have listened to your father." The sound of sirens pierced the fog. Diana's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Richard Davidson, we have the building surrounded." Through the window, Marcus saw Maya's car pulling up. His heart stopped. "No," he whispered. "Please, no." Maya parked. Behind the police cars, her heart pounding. Trevor grabbed her arm. "Mom, look." He pointed at the roof of the lake house. A sniper's barrel glinted in the morning sun. Inside, Richard Davidson paced like a caged animal. Pierce kept his gun trained on Marcus while speaking into a radio. "Sir, we're surrounded. Police units on all sides." Richard grabbed Marcus by the collar. "This is your fault. Everything I built destroyed because you couldn't follow the natural order of things." "The natural order?" Marcus spat back. "You mean corruption, murder, destroying innocent people's lives? I made you. Everything you are exists because of..." "No," Marcus said quietly. "Everything I am exists in spite of you." Outside, Diana Martinez coordinated with the SWAT team. Maya rushed up to her. "He's in there with Pierce," Maya said. "Pierce was military before working for the Davidsons. Special Forces." "How do you know that?" "Trevor found it. He's been researching everyone involved since this started. He said knowing your enemy is important." Inside the house, Richard's phone rang. It was Gerald. "It's over, Richard," Eleanor recorded. "Everything. The night you came to her house when she confronted you about the bribes, she knew you were going to kill her. Richard's face went white. He grabbed the phone. "You're lying." Eleanor Davidson's voice filled the room, played from the recording. "I won't let you destroy this family, Richard. I won't let you turn Marcus into a monster like you." "She had a heart condition," Richard snarled. "Natural causes." "The pill bottles were switched," Gerald continued. "We found the proof in her safety deposit box, along with records of every illegal deal, every threat, every life you've destroyed, including James Wilson." Marcus watched his father's face crumble. For the first time, he saw fear in those cold eyes. Suddenly, Trevor's voice came through the open window. "Mom, wait!" Maya had slipped away from the police, moving toward the house. She had seen Pierce glance out the window, his gun wavering from Marcus for just a second. Richard saw her too. He grinned madly. "Perfect. Pierce, take care of the problem." "No." Marcus lunged forward as Pierce turned toward the window. The gun went off. Glass shattered. Maya screamed. But it was Richard who fell, clutching his chest. Pierce's bullet had hit him instead of Maya. "Your grandmother was right about you," Pierce said to Marcus. "She asked me to protect you, to gather evidence. I've been working with her lawyer all along." Police stormed the house. Diana grabbed Maya, pulling her to safety. Trevor ran to his mother's arms. Richard Davidson lay on the floor, bleeding but alive. "Marcus," he gasped. "Son." Marcus knelt beside his father. "It's over, Dad. The Davidson legacy isn't what you built. It's what grandmother tried to protect, and now it's what I'll rebuild." Hours later, at the beach house, Maya found Marcus sitting on the sand again. The moon was rising over the water. "Trevor's finally asleep," she said. "He wants to write a book about all of this. Says it'll make a great story." "Smart kid. He gets that from his mother." Maya smiled, sitting beside him. "Maya, I need to tell you something. All of this, everything that happened, it made me realize what really matters. Money, power, the Davidson name. None of it means anything without..." Police car pulled up to the beach house. Diana stepped out, waving urgently. "They found another recording," she called out. "You both need to hear this. It changes everything." Diana played the recording on her laptop. Eleanor Davidson's voice filled the beach house living room. "Marcus, if you're hearing this, then something has happened to me. There's something you need to know about Maya Johnson. 20 years ago, before she married James Wilson, she worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. She took care of your mother in her final days." Maya gasped. Marcus turned to her, but she was staring at the laptop, her face pale. "I remember," she whispered. "Caroline Davidson. She was so kind to me. I was just starting my nursing career. She told me about her son." The recording continued. "Your father told you your mother abandoned us, ran away with another man. It was a lie, Marcus. Caroline was going to expose his corrupt dealings. He threatened her, said he'd make sure she never saw you again. She tried to fight him in court, but he bought off judges, destroyed evidence. The stress caused her health to deteriorate." Trevor sat on the stairs, listening, his eyes wide. Maya reached for his hand. "The night before she died," Eleanor's voice trembled, "Caroline gave Maya a letter for you. Richard found out. He threatened Maya's nursing license, her future. She was young, scared. She had no choice but to give him the letter." Marcus stood up, pacing. "All these years, Dad said Mom didn't even say goodbye." "The letter," Maya said softly. "She wrote how much she loved you, how she'd never abandon you. She made me promise to look after you if anything happened to her. But your father, he said he'd destroy my career before it began. I was 20, pregnant with Trevor." A week later, Eleanor continued on the recording. "Caroline died. Richard claimed it was her weak heart. But I knew better. Maya left nursing after that, started over. I kept track of her over the years, made sure she was safe. When you told me about meeting her at the coffee shop, about feeling drawn to her kindness, I knew it wasn't coincidence. Some bonds survive even time and lies." Diana stopped the recording. "There's more. Caroline Davidson's medical records, proof of Richard's threats, everything Eleanor collected over the years." "But why didn't grandmother tell me sooner?" Marcus asked. "The final recording explains that," Diana said. She was waiting until you were ready, until you could see through your father's manipulation on your own. She knew if she told you too soon, Richard's influence over you was too strong. You wouldn't have believed it. Maya stood up. I should have fought harder, should have found a way to get you the letter. You were protecting your child, Marcus said, just like my mother was trying to protect me. Trevor walked up to Marcus. Does this mean you knew my mom before when she was a nurse? I was 12. Marcus smiled sadly. I probably came to visit Mom at the hospital. Maya probably took my temperature, brought me juice. I remember, Maya said suddenly. You were reading Harry Potter. You told me you wanted to be a wizard. When you grew up so you could make your mom better. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his family, was shifting. Pierce arrived with another file. Sir, we found something else in the safety deposit box. A deed. The coffee shop building, your grandmother bought it 10 years ago. It's in your name. Maya shook her head. All those inspections, the lease termination. Dad's people were trying to evict you from a building I owned, Marcus finished. Grandmother must have known someday. A loud crash from upstairs interrupted him. Diana drew her gun. Pierce ran toward the sound. Everyone down, he shouted. A familiar voice called out from the darkness. Did you really think it was over? Richard. Davidson stood at the top of the stairs, blood seeping through his hospital gown, a gun in his trembling hand. You took everything from me, he snarled. Now I'll take everything from you. The gun pointed at Maya. Trevor screamed. Marcus jumped in front. The gunshot echoed through the beach house. Marcus fell backward. Maya screamed. Pierce tackled Richard, sending them both crashing into the wall. Trevor ran to Marcus, who lay clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers, but he was alive. The letter. Richard laughed manically as Diana handcuffed him. You want to know what your precious mother wrote, how she was going to take you away, make you common, ordinary, weak. The only weak person here is you, Marcus groaned, Maya pressing a towel to his wound. Mum tried to save me from becoming like you, and she succeeded. Ambulances arrived, their sirens cutting through the night. As paramedics worked on Marcus, Maya found the strength she'd been holding back for 20 years. I did take care of your son, Caroline, she whispered. Just like I promised. Not then, but now, when he needed someone to see him for who he really is. A week later, the coffee shop reopened. The sign above the door read, Caroline's Place. Inside, the walls displayed photos of the original Caroline, Davidson smiling, holding a young Marcus. Richard Davidson's trial became the biggest scandal the city had seen. Eleanor's evidence revealed decades of corruption. Other victims came forward. The empire crumbled, but something better grew from its ruins. Maya stood behind the counter, watching Trevor help Marcus with his sling. The boy had appointed himself personal nurse, taking the role very seriously. Mom, Trevor called out. Marcus says I can turn the storage room into a science lab for after-school projects, Maya smiled, as long as nothing explodes. No promises. Marcus winked, walking to the counter. His good arm slid around her waist. You know, this place feels right. Like this is what it was always meant to be. Your grandmother knew, Maya said. All those years she was watching, planning, making sure that someday her grandson would find his way home, to the family he was meant to have. The door chimed. Diana and Gerald walked in, carrying files. The judge approved everything. Gerald announced, the Davidson Industries' assets will be liquidated. The money will go to a foundation for victims of corporate corruption. And, Diana added, Richard Davidson's plea deal requires him to admit to everything, including what he did to your mother. Marcus held Maya tighter. It's really over. Not over, Maya corrected. Just beginning. Trevor bounded over. Can we have a celebration with cake and can I make a speech? I wrote one. Everyone laughed. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching the new photo on the wall. Maya, Marcus, and Trevor at the beach house, their first real family picture. That evening, after closing, Maya found Marcus sitting at a table reading an old letter. They found it in Dad's safe, he said. Mum's original letter, want to hear it? Maya sat beside him, taking his hand. The paper was yellowed, but Caroline Davidson's words were clear. My dearest Marcus, love isn't about money or power or family names. It's about the people who see your heart, who stand by you when the world turns dark. Someday you'll understand. Someday you'll find the kind of love that makes you brave, that makes you want to be better. And when you do, hold on to it with everything. You have all my love, Mom. Marcus looked at Maya, then at Trevor, who was carefully organizing his new science equipment. She was right, he said softly. About everything. Maya kissed him gently. She'd be proud of you. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Inside Caroline's place, a new family had found their home. Not in mansion walls or family legacies, but in the simple truth Caroline Davidson had died protecting. That love, real love, sees past all barriers, survives all lies, and finds its way home, no matter how long it takes. Trevor's voice broke the moment. Mom, Marcus, come see what happens when you mix baking soda and vinegar. Maya and Marcus looked at each other and laughed. Their story wasn't ending. In many ways, it was just beginning. And this time, they would write it together.